Hey there, everyone. Good Tuesday afternoon. I'm meteorologist Valerie Mills. Thanks for joining me for SkyTower Weather Now, as we have a lot of tropics to talk as all eyes continue to remain on Hurricane Erin, continuing to move away from the Caribbean islands, the Bahamas, the Turks and Caicos, seeing some improving conditions as we look through the remainder of today and into tomorrow. But it's up the East Coast now, where while this storm is not going to make a direct hit, any landfall out of Hurricane Erin, it certainly is going to be bringing some big impacts from Florida all the way up the East Coast, even as far as Maine, going to be dealing with some big surf from this system. So let's go ahead and just jump right into the graphics. There is the latest with Hurricane Erin packing 105-mile-per-hour winds. We got the 2 o'clock advisory in just about an hour ago, and so all of this is the latest as of this afternoon. We are still tracking a very large hurricane. This extends out about 80 miles as far as the hurricane force winds. With the good news with that is the overall wind field, as far as those 75-plus-mile-per-hour winds, that's going to remain good enough a ways offshore, but it's the tropical storm force winds. Those extend out 230 miles, an even larger wind field than the updates and the advisories from this morning. With that, Hurricane Erin still expected to produce life-threatening, very dangerous surf and rip current conditions, along with tropical storm winds and coastal flooding, especially for North Carolina. We're eyeing some new advisories out today, and they do include really all of the Outer Banks, with not just tropical storm force conditions expected, but there is also going to be a bit of a storm surge threat focused there as well. That's where Erin is going to make its closest pass to the continental U.S. But there's the latest look at our enhanced satellites. Still a pretty good looking storm. Now, some things that we are noticing is that Erin is being disrupted by some vertical wind shear, and you kind of see it looking a little bit more ragged, especially on the western and the northwestern quadrant of the storm. But still, what is important with this is that the overall structure and the features with this still really well defined, and especially the eye. We are still seeing that overall core and the eye wall still continuing to hold some really good bones, some really good structural features that still show a pretty impressive hurricane. Also seeing some slight changes in the overall pressure, but no big change there. We are still going to be talking about what we have seen a lot of models showing, still an increase in size from where the storm is now, and that is going to come with a growing wind field. And we'll talk more about the expected strength and intensity of Erin moving forward. But some good changes here. No longer seeing any advisories for the Bahamas, the Turks and Caicos. We had those to start the day on Tuesday, where we have seen some new advisories on the board. That's as we take you to North Carolina and the coast of Virginia, where our new advisories as of this morning include a tropical storm warning that runs from Beaufort, England to Duck, North Carolina, and then we have the tropical storm watch that runs just north of Duck to Cape Charles Light, that extends up into the Virginia Beach area. And so we are really going to be watching, on top of that, surge warnings that are up for the coast of North Carolina from Cape Lookout to Duck. So it's really the Beaufort Inlet to the Duck area in North Carolina, where at this point we are expecting the tropical storm warnings to extend, and the worst of overall some of those conditions as far as the wind on top of the storm surge and some of the flooding concerns there. But so far in South Carolina, how about this live picture there? Myrtle Beach, tons of surfers have been out the last couple of days, really enjoying some of the bigger waves, which we have started to see increase ahead of Hurricane Erin's path up the East Coast. But for now, conditions not too bad for some of the surfers out there, though we are starting to see some red flag conditions that is prompting swimmers to stay out of the water, and really a lot of areas already encouraging some of that beach safety, as we are already under some of these rip current advisories. But there's a look at our visible satellites. A little ominous to be seeing a pretty impressive looking system about 400 miles just off Florida's east coast. But the good and the important change is that we started to see that pivot further to the north, and I'll show you the updated track map here in just a second. But this is some scenes that we've been seeing around the area. Swells picking up ahead of Hurricane Erin, and a lot of people out enjoying it. Some of this footage shot in the Jacksonville Beach area, where overall this is our current wave heights. So far we're seeing about 5 to 9 foot readings off of some of our local buoys there along the Space Coast. We look closer to the core of Hurricane Erin. It looks like that buoy reading has dropped off for us, but we were seeing that running at about 25 to 30 feet right around the core over the last couple of minutes. Looks like an error with that reading there. But then as we take you further up the East Coast, look at some of the wave heights that we've already seen increase just offshore, seeing some of those not breaking waves on shore, but just off the coastline there, up to 8 and 11 feet as we look to some of the areas there just off the Carolinas and into the Virginia Beach area. Now, something we have been noticing is this wind shear slightly impacting the storm, but as I already mentioned to you, a lot of the bones are still there, and overall a pretty impressive looking system, and there is still the potential for this to strengthen a little bit more. Now we are down to Category 2 status with Hurricane Erin, sustained winds 105 miles per hour with a little bit of an increase in the forward motion already starting. Now as we started to initially see that turn to the north and northwest, it slowed down pretty significantly, and you think of it like turning a car. You typically would pump the brakes a little bit as you are making that curve, but now as we're starting to see the steering to the north pick up on Hurricane Erin, it is continuing to increase that forward motion now to the north and northwest at about 10 miles per hour, and there you see the timing. It's going to be moving up the east coast of Florida through the remainder of Tuesday into Wednesday. Then by Wednesday night and Thursday, that's when it's going to make the close pass to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, with the biggest impacts there for the mid-Atlantic. Then we see that sharp turn off to the north and east by Friday and into this weekend. Conditions will start to improve, but we will be eyeing areas well up into the northeast from Thursday and Friday. We're talking from Kitty Hawk through Ocean City and Atlantic City up into the Montauk area, Nantucket. That's when we are going to be talking about some higher surf and some more impacts along the coast there as it skirts right along that track. But really, models have been doing a really good job at handling the system as the steering really set up to be favorable. If all storms could track this way, that would be nice, wouldn't it? But with that, we are still seeing that skirt right along the coast, and it's kind of bringing some different impacts than a direct hit where we'd be, say, focusing in on an area, that sort of region for the impacts. This is really going to be just running right along the coast there, with the impacts continuing to follow it as well, and that is going to bump up some of those tropical storm force conditions right along our mid-Atlantic coastline there. And so it's Outer Banks that's going to make that closest skirt to it, and so that's why we do have some of the evacuation orders up, as we are going to be talking the potential for those outer rain bands to move through late Wednesday through late Thursday. Along with that, we are going to be dealing with some of those stronger wind gusts up into the range of 50 to 60 miles per hour. Along with that, of course, we're going to have the large breaking waves, but beach erosion is a concern, and overwash over some of the sand dunes there that could make some of the roads impassable, and particularly Highway 12 in North Carolina. That's been one of the spots where we have seen a lot of backup on roads, but also the concern there for maybe that to be dealing with some of those roads being washed out by some of the breaking waves and the sand that's going to be carried away from the beaches. Rip current risk is up all up and down the coast. You see it from areas just south of, I believe it was Nantucket. Let's roll it back. Yeah, see, Nantucket is under a moderate risk, but from the south there, the Hamptons, all the way down the coast there, Ocean City into the Norfolk, Virginia area, down to Cape Hatteras, and further Myrtle Beach into Savannah and our local beaches on the east coast of Florida, all under a high rip current risk for today. And this is a live picture in Jacksonville Beach. And so moving forward from here, we continue to watch for an increase in waves, where we are talking 5 to 8 foot waves to be possible here along the Space Coast. We went from a rip current advisory this morning to a high surf advisory. So we have been upgraded from about the West Palm area all the way through our North Florida spots, and this even carries on into Georgia and the Carolinas as well. So here's a look at the timing. We're on the high side. We're looking at Wednesday to be the peak of our waves. We're talking breakers around 10 to 12 feet. That is certainly going to be possible as this storm is really creating a large wind field, and that is going to allow it to chuck a lot of energy back across our coast. And even though we are seeing a good trend as far as it's been downgraded in the overall strength, it still churns up a lot of energy in the ocean, and that energy does have to go somewhere. And as we're talking about all of this pressure bundled up very closely to the coastline there, that's a lot of pressure being pushed up along the coast, and we see that in the form of these large waves, but also some of the outer bands of the strong tropical storm force winds that will move through. And it's going to take a little bit of time for things to calm down. We see by Friday we're down to more of the 3 to 6 foot wave heights, and then on into the weekend things slowly start to improve. But it does take a little bit of time when these storms well up as much energy as this is expected to do. It does take a little bit of time for the seas to wind back down to a normal state. And so right on into this weekend, we are still going to be dealing with some pretty rough ocean conditions all across the Atlantic. There we see some of those wave heights as we get up into the mid-Atlantic. That's where the concern is for 15 to 20 foot wave heights, and that trend has been pretty solid the last several days as we have seen overall Erin trend farther on the southern and then the western side of the tracks that we have been overall watching for the last several days. That does just bump up those tropical storm conditions a little bit closer to the coast there, and even along the northeast, talking several feet. And yeah, you remember this footage. This was last hurricane season, actually August of last hurricane season. This was in Rodanthe, North Carolina, right there in the Outer Banks where, yeah, we were talking about homes collapsing into the water from some pretty intense waves. And it's things like this that are going to be a concern, as it is beautiful there, especially in those barrier islands where we do see a lot of homes right there on the sand, on the beach like that. But when we're talking 15 upwards of 20 foot waves, definitely going to be a problem for that portion of the coast. And this is a look at our overall winds, which the big story that we see here, all of these bright orange colors, that's where we're talking about the peak winds with this storm. Notice the trend, pretty good. Pointing out Bermuda there, the small island of Bermuda, which no stranger to hurricanes or tropical systems. It's right on the outskirts of where the peak wind gusts are going to be. So we're more in the range there of 40 to 50 mile per hour gusts. Still significant, still enough to cause some power outages, trees down, and a lot of problems. Similar side of it there along the East Coast. We will see some of those far outer bands that are able to produce 40 and 50 mile per hour wind gusts, but on the high side, especially there in the Hatteras area, we are watching the potential for 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts. And even look up into the Southampton area, Atlantic City, going to also be dealing with 35 to 45 mile per hour gusts. They will be a little bit calmer on the southern side of that. You see Savannah up to the 20 mile per hour range as far as some of the peak gusts. But the other advisory I briefly mentioned to you, on top of some of our tropical storm warnings and watches that cover the Outer Banks, the coast of North Carolina, up into the Virginia Beach area, we also have that potential storm surge where we are looking at the potential for 2 to 4 feet right there in the Outer Banks area, particularly from, let's see, the warning runs from Cape Lookout to Duck. That's where we have the potential for up to 4 feet of storm surge, and that would be causing some potential problems depending on the high tide cycle. We're really closely watching the high tide from late Wednesday into Thursday. That could line up with when the worst of the surge and the winds pushing on shore could be into that time frame for North Carolina. So we could be talking 4 feet above the normal high tide, which would allow for significantly more water to make it on shore. So we'll hope that it doesn't necessarily time out with the high tide cycle there for the Outer Banks. But there you see it, 8 o'clock, and we have the storm center making its closest pass to the East Coast, likely to be, say, about 200 or less miles offshore compared to closer to 400 off the east coast of Florida. And then we really start to see it take that curve off to the north and east, pulls away from areas in the northeast, from Boston to New York, up into the Nova Scotia and the New England area. We are going to be watching for some impacts and some kind of disrupted ocean conditions there just offshore, especially off the southern coast of New England. But otherwise, we really watch this continue to move away from us. And it's really this expanding wind field that is going to be a problem, as of course more of a larger system is able to bring some larger impacts. And that's exactly what we are seeing, with that trend being steady, with a lot of our global models showing this increase in the storm size. And let me play this back so you can overall see what I'm talking about here. The yellow color is covering the tropical storm force conditions and how far out they extend. Notice how much larger that gets as we head up into the mid-Atlantic area. So for that reason, certainly a good call to be talking about more of those conditions bumping up along the mid-Atlantic and prompting and getting an early start to some of those evacuations and preparations there along the Outer Banks. We've got more to talk about on top of this. We've got two other tropical waves in the Atlantic. Almost looks like a train of tropical waves behind Hurricane Erin. We're going to dive all into that, what we're expecting elsewhere in the tropics. Here's a quick look at your local forecast, though, before I send it to a quick break. Hey everyone, welcome back into SkyTower Weather Now. I wanted to start out with some pretty amazing footage captured in the eye of Hurricane Erin. I showed you this yesterday on the show, but maybe not all of you were here with me for it. So I wanted to just roll it back, as it really is incredible to get this perspective, this captured as the storm was just north of the Caribbean islands a couple of days ago, where we have something called the stadium effect, and you see the clouds kind of flowing outward from the bottom to the top of the inner eye wall. And an amazing phenomenon that we know about hurricanes but don't fully understand is, of course, that idea that it is perfectly calm right there in the center of the storm's eye, with the worst of the weather, as we know, right there in the outer eye wall. And we did see right after this was captured, Erin started to go through an eye wall replacement, and that is pretty typical with a strong hurricane. It does undergo some structural changes where it does briefly become weaker, but then is able to form out a larger eye. So looking back at Hurricane Erin, if you remember, this started out with a tropical wave well off the kind of eastern portion of the Atlantic, coming just off the coast of Africa. And we briefly were able to see this reach Category 5 strength as it was just north of the British Virgin Islands and the Northern Caribbean, then strengthened back down to still a major hurricane as it continued to pass just to the north and east of all of the islands there, right along the Turks and Caicos into the Bahamas, now down to Category 2 status. But this is one of few hurricanes to be able to reach it into that Cat 5 strength, while luckily, of course, we weren't talking about a landfall. This is an interesting look at all of the Category 5 landfalls that we have ever seen on record since they go back to the 1850s. And you see some in more recent history. Hurricane Michael back in 2018, when it hit the Florida Panhandle, I was actually working in Tallahassee when that happened. But now we can talk about Erin in the record books as one of 43 Category 5 hurricanes on record in the Atlantic. And this has been the fourth straight season to feature a Category 5 storm. Of course, we had two last year, Beryl and Milton, which were able to reach that status ahead of making landfall. So just some cool facts there with hurricanes and some of the tropical weather. We're always pulling together some stats, so I wanted to share some of those with you. But as we talk about what else is going on in the Atlantic basin, almost a train effect of the tropical waves, we've got Hurricane Erin just to the east of the Bahamas, tropical disturbance given a 60% chance of developing over the next 7 days. On the heels of that, and then right on the heels of that orange polygon, we've got the yellow jelly bean, which has been upgraded now to Invest 99L, and that means we have our first suite of model runs on this area, which the National Hurricane Center has flagged to further investigate, with the odds right now running rather low with that system. I'll show you the big picture here, where you can see both of those tropical waves still battling and encountering some of that Saharan dust there just off the coast of Africa. But Invest 99L looking a little bit more organized compared to the wave just ahead of that, which really is just a large and broad area of disorganized thunderstorms out there in the Atlantic. But here's a look at our first model runs with Invest 99L. It is going to take that more due westerly path, but you see it sagging pretty far to the south. We've got this really strong Bermuda high, and on the southern side of that, that's really allowing for some of these tropical waves to take off at a quick pace to the west. But notice none of the models really developing the system much, and so it's not a big area of concern as we get to, say, the end of this week and into this upcoming weekend starts to run into some less favorable conditions for developing. But what we are going to be keeping tabs on is right ahead of Invest 99L. The wave that's on the left here on your screen, that one is actually given a better chance of developing in the next couple of days, as it generally moves to the west-northwest, expecting that to be near the Leeward Islands as we get to, say, Friday and through this weekend, seeing some signs of some broad rotation trying to form and maybe some of that heavy rain moving through parts of the Caribbean. But we are still seeing the signs of, as we look out to some of our long-term steering, similar to what we saw with Erin, we may be talking about an East Coast trough that would kind of help shield the state of Florida, shield the East Coast, and allow instead for this system to maybe take more of that path up the east and kind of avoid some of our big land masses. Now, that's not a given, but that's just some of the current trends that we have been seeing with where overall the steering is going to set up, as we are looking with that several days out. And so we're just going to continue to watch it, see how the pattern evolves, see what the model consensus looks like. But just like we saw with Erin, it's as it really gets into these warmer waters where that's where we have a chance for something to form. So right now, this is where the served area is. You see it where the X is located, still running in these generally cooler water temperatures in the upper 70s. It continues on its track and approaches parts of the Caribbean islands, where at that point we have water temperatures well into the mid 80s and a lot of heat content in the ocean there to allow for some further strengthening. So that's the area where we're more likely to see some sort of development out of this. As we get to the end of the week, maybe we see a tropical depression form. We have been seeing models kind of, we'll say, a little bit spread out and struggling with this, as we would typically expect this early in the forecasting process. Before we have something that's formed out of this, models don't really handle very well the potential track. So we're just seeing the steering, where things are going to set up. We'll continue to keep you updated on that, of course, as we watch it. But the next name in line, Fernand, and then followed by Gabrielle. So Fernand is going to be a fun one to be saying. You want to say Fernand, but yeah, the official pronunciation from the National Hurricane Center there coming in with Fernand. Now, as we look at our weather pattern here for the state of Florida, of course, Hurricane Erin is going to be skirting off our east coast, but we will get a little sliver of some drier air in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. Not a ton of it, but just enough to be talking about some of that more refreshing air coming in on the backside of that. Winds out of the north, slight break in some of the overall rain chances, as that dry air will inhibit some of the shower and storm potential for the middle of the week, but pretty short-lived, and then we're kind of back up to our more typical summertime storm chances. A little bit of a word twister there. I'm saying a lot of words here for you in this half hour, but we check on temperatures right now up and down the Sunshine State. Feeling the heat, that's for sure, with many spots into the 90s. Currently 93 in Brooksville, 90 degrees for Tampa, and then we have the upper 80s there for St. Pete to Sarasota. Cooler up in Panama City to Pensacola. Temperatures there in the upper 70s to right into the low 80s. We're going to be talking about more of these mid 90s as we look inland. 96 Winter Haven, Frostproof to Sebring, Arcadia at 90 degrees, and then you see some of the rain-cooled air as we are tracking some thunderstorms starting to pop up. And I want to get you in to SkyTower radar and show you the activity that we're tracking out there. But we factor in the humidity. We've got a lot of that moisture in the atmosphere right now with that tropical system helping to feed off of that, and we're overall dealing with heat indices well into the triple digits for the area. The exception right near Clearwater, some of the rain-cooled air there, and then about 113 is the heat index right now in Northport. Frostproof to Sebring, 105 is what it's feeling like right now outside. 107 in Brandon, Tampa, feeling like 101. Newport Richey, mid-90s for you. Bradenton, about 108. All right, let's dive into the radar here and show you what's going on. SkyTower, as we are starting to see some areas popping up here. More of the sea breezes are going to be picking up the next couple of hours, but we looked at some of our southern spots first, where the trend has been these slow movers, and that's going to be the place again today, as we have, we'll call it relatively weak steering in place. And so as the showers and storms pop up, in some cases they're able to be rather efficient rain producers in a short window. So we will be watching for that through this evening and into the sunset time frame, this typical late day time frame for more of these thunderstorms, which right now around Arcadia, we briefly had some of that shower activity, now pushing south. Fort Ogden and into the Hull, and right outside of Nocatee, some downpours for you near Sidell, into Northport, some light shower activity, and then over along the coast in Sarasota, right there, a pretty good downpour just starting to build in from Sarasota Springs to Bee Ridge, down to the Gulf Gates Estate area, and right outside of Osprey. some heavy rain that's focused right over parts of I-75. So we'll keep tabs on that for you as more of this will continue to pop up here, as we'll get some of the outflow boundaries that could allow for more of those to spread. And as we overall are starting to see wind flow coming in more on that northerly side, you see the general motion of some of these thunderstorms that are generally singing more to the south here. And so we'll zoom you in to the heavy rain right now. Let me pause it here, just pushed out of the West Chase, Citrus Park, and Oldsmar area, where really heavy downpour right now over Safety Harbor, extending down into the Bayview area. We have it over the Howard Franklin as well as the Courtney Campbell bridges. So not great conditions right now, making the pass in between Hillsborough and Pinellas with just a lot of deep reds and even some purples there, showing those really intense rainfall rates. Right across to Feather Sound, also seeing that heavy downpour more on the northern side there, but seeing it break up just a bit then as we look to areas across the bridge to the Drew Park, Egypt Lake area. Some pretty heavy rain drifting in, starting to move out of the Carrollwood area. We have that right now over parts of South Tampa, down into the Port Tampa area, but much lighter in nature, not nearly as heavy as that section there that trends from Oldsmar down to the south of Safety Harbor. Now, as we take you a bit further to the north, you see Lutz to Odessa. Pretty good downpour just rolling through, starting to fizzle out a little bit as it pushes more into the northern Hillsborough area. But still, you do see how slow some of these showers and storms are moving, and overall that will allow them to be able to maybe cause some localized flooding concerns here or there, some ponding up on some of the poorly drained areas that we typically see some of those flooding concerns. I know I run into some of those as I'm making my way home, and already it only takes, say, one thunderstorm to cause some of that puddling up. Polk County, mostly pretty quiet, but right there along I-4, we are starting to see some of that heavy rain move in right near Four Corners and the Champions Gate area. So we'll be keeping close tabs on those, with more of this going to jump on the radar here the next couple of hours. Otherwise, things are generally pretty quiet for most of the rest of the area. We're going to talk more details, give you a full dive into your local forecast right on the other side of the break. And in the meantime, we'll give you a look at what's going on elsewhere in the country, where we have been very tropics focused, but we are tracking some heat out west. Cold front moving into the northeast with some showers there. We'll give you a fly around, and I'll see you right back here in just a couple of minutes. Everyone, welcome back into the show, taking you live outside. Here's the view in downtown Tampa, where we are definitely seeing some of those storm clouds fill in the sky. Temperature right at 80 degrees, as we have seen that knocked back quite a bit thanks to some of that AC from Mother Nature. We take you out to SkyTower radar, where an active picture, but only for parts of the area, as coverage has been in this hit or miss range, and that is going to be the status again today, with a lot of areas missing out. But those who do get the rain, we are seeing some heavy rain, and we're watching that with this thunderstorm as it's pushing out of northern parts of Hillsborough, drifting right over Tampa Bay spots, the bridge areas right now. A lot of heavy rain. We've just started to see that move into the Gandy, picking up for areas right around downtown St. Pete and into Pinellas Park, seeing some of that heavy rain just outside for you, but starting to see it move out of Oldsmar, Carrollwood, Egypt Lake, still in the mix for that, but starting to see some improvements there. And then we've got a couple of other areas as we look south, some of those pop-up showers and thunderstorms generally drifting right along into the east of 75, but then we have that one area of rain right over Gulf Gate Estates, closer to the coast there. Mostly quiet across our inland spots. It's just to the south of Arcadia as well as Lake Placid where we are seeing some of those heavy pockets of rain, but otherwise those are continuing to kind of drift out of the area there. We'll see some improvement to some of those regions that are seeing some of those heavy downpours. As we look at the next couple of hours here, going to be tracking more of these to be popping up as we get to 5 and 6 o'clock. Then the activity will really start to wind down, with these generally drifting further south. A couple of those could drift back into our Tampa Bay spots into the early evening hours. Then by 9 and 10 o'clock, we start to clear things out pretty nicely. And that will be good if you are heading to the Rays game, as we are going to overall be tracking decreasing storm chances, with temperatures warming back into the upper 80s around first pitch. So a few of those thunderstorms around early on. Definitely hot and steamy, but we should see most of those thunderstorms clearing out of the area for most of the game, as temperatures will wind down to the mid 80s as you're making your way home. Which, speaking about temperatures yesterday, let's roll back and look at the highs that we saw to kick off our work week. A lot of 90s in place. We ended up making a run at 94 in Tampa. Brandon to Bartow hit 95. Winter Haven, high of 98. You were the hot spot on the board. Even 93 for Clearwater and St. Pete. Sarasota at 92. Not a ton of relief even right there along the immediate coastline. And really, as we have rung into the start of August, look at our temperatures. We have been above average almost every single day. The exception was the weekend before last, where we ended up only hitting a high of 89 on Sunday, 91 the day before on Saturday, the second full weekend in August there. But otherwise, every single day highlighted in red, that's where we have been dealing with above average temperatures. And with that, we have been seeing some rain here and there. You see the rainy season overall looking pretty solid, with an inch here, an inch there, and some days where we haven't gotten any rain at the Tampa International Airport. But overall, our rain percentages around normal as for our Tampa Bay locations. And so in some cases, some small deficits, but we're overall near average as far as our rain averages for the year and for the month for a good portion of our Tampa Bay locations. Here's a look at our temperatures right now, where you see some of those showers really impacting temperatures in a good way. Clearwater 78, 83 at Newport Richey, and where we are feeling the heat, areas that have not been able to benefit on any of that rain-cooled stormy activity. 96 for Frostproof and Sebring at this hour, 95 for Bartow as well as Wauchula. And so as we look at the next couple of hours, we're going to see temperatures slowly cool down. I showed you the forecast for the Rays game, and so overall in many cases by 7, 8 o'clock, mid 80s, temperatures falling then into the upper 70s for overnight lows. And so we're going to see a mix of temperatures in the 70s to near 80 degrees as we get closer to the immediate coast. But I think a lot of spots will bottom out in the 70s tonight. We're still a little bit above average. Our normal morning low in Tampa is 77, and we've been running more with the low in the mid 80s, so at least 79 is putting us much closer to our seasonal averages for overnight temperatures. Highs tomorrow We're forecasting 94 in Tampa, a mix of low to mid 90s, closer to the coast, near 90 degrees, inland up to 95, 96 for highs. Of course, factor in the humidity. That is going to be plenty up there for tomorrow, where we are going to be feeling heat indices up to the triple digits. I'll show you your 7-day forecast in just a minute, but a quick check on our enhanced satellite with Hurricane Erin, which we continue to track moving just to the east of the Bahamas. I want to give you one last look at the track map with our 2 p.m. advisory, keeping the sustained winds running at 105 miles per hour. We are seeing this storm take its turn to the north, so it's going to be more on this northwest northerly track through the middle of this week, making its closest pass late Wednesday through Thursday, right there along the outer banks of North Carolina. It's going to pick up a bit more forward speed through tonight, and then as we get to Thursday and Friday, really takes that sharp curve off to the northeast, moving out to sea, staying well outside of the Bermuda area and further to the south of the northeast coast. And the impacts, of course, as we've been talking about, the very dangerous rip currents and the high surf that we've already seen spread in for parts of the east coast. So just something to keep in mind. Take it easy all week long. We're going to be dealing with those rough ocean conditions, and some improvement comes this weekend as we finally will see Erin pull away, and that's going to slowly start to calm conditions back to normal for our beaches. There's a look at your 7-day forecast. More of this summer heat is on, with the mid-90s the next couple of days down to the low 90s, and storm chances running a little bit below average, 30 to 40% come Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. For the weekend, back up to hit or miss afternoon thunderstorms coverage around 50%. Thanks everyone for being here with me. We'll see you back here same time, same place tomorrow.